My name is Dorothy Thompson, and I'm 68 years old. I live in a modest condominium in Scottsdale, Arizona, where I've spent the last 5 years trying to be the perfect widow, the perfect mother, the perfect grandmother. What I discovered on that scorching Tuesday morning in July would change everything about how I saw myself, my family, and what it means to live with dignity. Before continuing, please indicate in the comment below which city you are watching from. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping my morning coffee and scrolling through Facebook on my iPad, a skill I'd reluctantly learned after my husband Harold passed away. The social worker at the grief support group had insisted it would help me stay connected with family. What a cruel joke that turned out to be. The post appeared in my news feed like a slap across the face. My mom is such a burden. Wish she'd understand I have my own life to live. My daughter Jennifer's profile picture smiled back at me from the screen. The same bright smile she'd given me last week when she'd asked to borrow another $500 for groceries. My hands started shaking as I read the comments. Dozens of people had liked the post. Dozens, including my sister Margaret, my nephew David, even Jennifer's neighbor from Tempe, whom I'd helped move last month. The humiliation burned through my chest like acid. But it was the comments that truly destroyed me. Girl, you need to set boundaries with your mom. Have you considered assisted living for her? My mom was the same way until I put my foot down. And Jennifer's responses. I know, right? She calls me like 10 times a day. I can't even plan a simple vacation to the Caribbean with Brad without her making it about her. 10 times a day? I called her perhaps twice a week, and only when she didn't return my messages. A vacation to the Caribbean. This was the first I'd heard of any travel plans. And making it about me. I'd never asked her for anything except perhaps a phone call on my birthday. I scrolled further back through her posts, my coffee growing cold as I discovered months of complaints about me. Mom showed up unannounced again today. Doesn't she understand boundaries? From 2 weeks ago, when I'd brought her homemade chocolate chip cookies after she mentioned Brad was stressed about work. Having to cancel dinner plans again because Mom needs something from last month. Referring to the evening I'd called because I'd fallen in my bathroom and needed someone to check on me. Each post painted me as a needy, clingy old woman who couldn't accept that her daughter had grown up. The comments were worse. Suggestions about memory care facilities, jokes about boomer entitlement, advice about cutting off financial support to teach me independence. I sat there in my quiet kitchen, surrounded by the photos of family vacations, graduations, and holidays. Photos where I was always the one behind the camera, never the one being celebrated, and realized that I had become exactly what they said I was, a burden, not because I was needy or demanding, but because I had made myself so available, so eager to help, so grateful for any scraps of attention that I had lost all value in their eyes. The silence of my condo felt different that morning, not peaceful but hollow. The phone didn't ring. No one dropped by. No one needed anything from me, and apparently that was exactly how they wanted it. I was invisible unless they needed money, babysitting, or someone to blame for their inconveniences. That's when I made my first decision. I closed the Facebook app, set down my iPad, and whispered to the empty room, if I'm such a burden, maybe it's time I started acting like the asset I actually am. What my ungrateful family didn't know was about to become their most expensive lesson in gratitude. After that devastating morning, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I kept replaying Jennifer's words, the casual cruelty of reducing her own mother to a social media complaint. But as the initial shock wore off, something else began to emerge. A cold, calculating clarity I hadn't felt since Harold's death. I walked to my bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of Harold's old dresser, the one Jennifer and Brad had never bothered to look through during their occasional visits. Beneath old photo albums and Harold's military medals lay a manila folder marked Estate Documents. My hands didn't shake this time as I opened it. The truth was all there, documented in neat columns and official letterhead. When Harold passed away 3 years ago, he'd left me more than just memories and condolences. He'd left me Thompson Pharmacy Holdings, LLC, a small chain of 3 independent pharmacies he'd built over 30 years of careful investment and community service. I was the sole owner of properties worth $2.5 million, generating monthly income that I'd barely touched. Harold had always managed our finances, and after his death, I'd simply let his financial advisor, Robert Martinez, handle everything. Keep living simply, Dorothy, he'd advised. Let the investments grow. You'll never have to worry about money. I'd followed his advice so completely that I'd almost forgotten what I actually owned. The monthly statements told the story I'd been too grief-stricken to fully comprehend. Property values in Arizona had skyrocketed. The pharmacy locations, one in Paradise Valley, one in Ahwatukee, and one in North Scottsdale, were now sitting on prime real estate. The rental income alone was generating $18,000 per month, most of which had been automatically reinvested. But there was more. Harold had been secretly investing in tech stocks since the early 2000s, convinced that companies like Apple and Amazon would change the world. His $50,000 initial investment had grown to over $800,000. There were municipal bonds, CD ladders, and even a small portfolio of rental properties in Tucson that I'd completely forgotten about. I spread the documents across Harold's old desk and did the math, including my Social Security, pension from my 30 years as an elementary school teacher, and the investment income. I had more money coming in each month than Jennifer and Brad made combined at their jobs, and they thought I was living on scraps. Dependent on their occasional handouts, the irony was suffocating. Every time Jennifer had loaned me money for groceries or utilities, money I'd never actually needed but had accepted because it made her feel important, I'd been subsidizing their lifestyle while sitting on a fortune. When Brad had explained to me last Christmas why they couldn't afford to visit for more than 2 days, I'd given them $2,000 for gas and hotel expenses. That money could have covered their mortgage payment. I called Robert Martinez immediately. "Dorothy, it's good to hear from you." His familiar voice provided comfort I desperately needed. "How can I help you today?" "Robert, I need to understand my financial position completely. Everything. And I need to know my options for reorganizing things." There was a pause. "Is everything all right? You sound different." "I'm fine, Robert. Actually, I think I'm finally waking up." We arranged to meet that afternoon at his office in downtown Phoenix. The drive gave me time to think, to plan, to let the anger crystallize into something more useful. Strategy. Robert's office overlooked the Salt River, and the view reminded me of the life Harold and I had built together. Patient, steady, forward-thinking, he'd provided for me even after death, protecting me in ways I was only now beginning to understand. "Dorothy," Robert said, settling behind his mahogany desk, "your net worth is currently $3.2 million. With proper management, you could live very comfortably for the rest of your life without touching the principal. You could travel the world, buy a bigger house, do anything you wanted. What about making changes to how things are structured? Hypothetically speaking," Robert leaned forward. "What kind of changes?" I told him everything. The Facebook posts, the casual cruelty, the years of taking my financial help while excluding me from their lives, Jennifer's complaints about my very existence while simultaneously treating me as their personal ATM. "I see," Robert said quietly. "You know, Dorothy, Harold mentioned something to me once about being concerned that Jennifer might take advantage of you after he was gone. He said she'd always been financially opportunistic." He said that. Not in those words exactly, but yes, he loved her dearly, but he wasn't blind to her character. That's why he structured everything to protect your independence. He wanted to make sure you'd never be dependent on anyone. Harold had known. Even in death, he'd been protecting me from my own family. "Robert, I want to know about every asset, every option, every legal tool at my disposal. And I want to know about purchasing property. Specifically, I want to know about buying a house in Tempe." Robert's eyebrows rose slightly, but he smiled. "I think Harold would be proud of you right now, Dorothy. Let me make some calls." As I drove home that evening, I passed a billboard advertising luxury retirement communities in Sedona. The elegant woman in the advertisement looked confident, independent, surrounded by friends who actually enjoyed her company. For the first time in 3 years, I could picture myself in that life, not as someone's burden, but as someone with choices, with power, with the resources to live on my own terms. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Mom, can you help us out with rent this month? Brad's commission check was smaller than expected. Just $800. We'll pay you back next month. Promise." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I'll need to check my budget and get back to you." For the first time in our relationship, I'd said no. Well, not exactly no, but not the immediate yes she'd come to expect. The dots appeared and disappeared several times as she tried to craft a response. Finally, "Mom, is everything okay? You never have to check your budget when we need help." That was the problem, wasn't it? I never had to check my budget because they assumed I lived as precariously as they did. They had no idea that their poor old mom could buy their house in cash and not even notice the expense. I turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of the good wine, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. Tonight felt special enough. Tonight was the beginning of my education in power and my family's education in gratitude. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The victim mentality that had clouded my thinking since Harold's death had evaporated, replaced by something sharper and infinitely more dangerous. Purpose. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began researching my daughter's life with the methodical precision of a private investigator. Facebook became my reconnaissance tool. Jennifer's privacy settings were laughably inadequate. She shared everything publicly, apparently convinced that her 68-year-old mother was too technologically incompetent to navigate social media effectively. What I discovered over the next several hours painted a picture of financial irresponsibility that would have made Harold roll over in his grave. Photos from expensive restaurants every weekend, tagged with captions like, "We deserve this," and "YOLO," a brand new Jeep Wrangler in their driveway, purchased just 2 months ago, right after I'd given them $3,000 for their emergency car repairs for their supposedly dying Honda. Brad's latest hobby, a $5,000 mountain bike that he'd apparently bought on credit, based on his post about finally financing my dream ride. But the most revealing discovery was a public conversation between Jennifer and her friend Melissa from last week. "Girl, how are you affording the Cabo trip? I thought you guys were broke." Jennifer's response, "We are. But you know how my mom is. She'll come through. She always does. She feels guilty about being alone, so she tries to buy our time. It's actually kind of sad. But whatever works, right?" I stared at that emoji, the laughing face, until it burned into my retinas. My grief, my loneliness, my desperate attempts to maintain connection with my only child. It was all a joke to her. A manipulation tactic she discussed with friends like some kind of psychological experiment. I called Robert Martinez immediately. "Robert, I need you to help me with something, and I need complete discretion." "Of course, Dorothy. What do you need?" "I want to buy a house. Specifically, I want to buy 2847 Palm Street in Tempe, and I need to do it through an LLC that can't be traced back to me." There was a pause. "Dorothy, may I ask why you want that particular address?" "Because my daughter and son-in-law live there, and according to Maricopa County public records, they're 3 months behind on their mortgage payments." "I see." Robert's voice was carefully neutral. "And you want to help them?" "I want to teach them the difference between entitlement and gratitude. There's a difference, Robert, and it's a lesson worth $2.5 million. Over the next week, Robert worked his magic. Desert Holdings LLC was established with me as the anonymous beneficiary. The company purchased 2847 Palm Street from the bank for $340,000, significantly less than market value due to the pending foreclosure. Jennifer and Brad had no idea their financial salvation had come from the woman they'd been mocking online. But buying their house was just the beginning. I had a much more comprehensive education in mind. My next call was to Dr. Patricia Chen, a geriatrician whom I'd met at Harold's memorial service. "Dr. Chen, this is Dorothy Thompson. I have an unusual request, and I need your professional discretion." "Of course. Mrs. Thompson, how can I help?" "I need to appear to be developing health problems. Nothing dangerous, nothing that would actually harm me, but convincing enough to require significant care from family members." Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Thompson, may I ask what this is about?" I explained everything. The Facebook posts, the financial exploitation, My plan to teach them about responsibility and gratitude. To my surprise, Dr. Chen didn't sound shocked. Mrs. Thompson, what you're describing is unfortunately common. Adult children who view elderly parents as financial resources rather than human beings deserving of respect. As a geriatrician, I see this kind of elder abuse regularly. Elder abuse. The term hit me like a physical blow. Financial and emotional elder abuse. Yes, the pattern you're describing, taking money while providing minimal emotional support. Public humiliation. Treating you as a burden while simultaneously depending on you financially. These are textbook examples. Dr. Chen agreed to help me develop a medically plausible but ultimately harmless health scare. We'll say you're experiencing early signs of cognitive decline. Nothing severe, but enough to require regular check-ins and assistance with daily tasks. I'll provide documentation that will stand up to scrutiny, but we'll design the symptoms to be completely reversible. My third collaborator was Margaret Walsh, a retired drama teacher from my church who'd been widowed around the same time I had. Margaret had always been theatrical, and when I explained my plan, her eyes lit up with mischievous delight. Dorothy Thompson, you magnificent woman. I've been watching you let that spoiled daughter walk all over you for 3 years. It's about time you grew a backbone. Margaret helped me perfect my performance. We practiced symptoms of confusion, memory lapses, and the kind of helplessness that would trigger Jennifer's sense of obligation, if not her genuine concern. Margaret was particularly good at coaching me on the subtle details, forgetting familiar names, misplacing common items, repeating questions. The key, Margaret explained during one of our rehearsal sessions, is to make it believable but not tragic. You want them worried enough to pay attention, but not so scared that they call in professional help immediately. You need their guilt and their greed working together. Meanwhile, Robert was handling the legal aspects of my plan. Dorothy, I've restructured your estate exactly as you requested. If anything were to happen to you, or if you were to be declared incompetent, everything goes to the Arizona Humane Society. Jennifer and Brad will inherit exactly nothing, and they don't know about this change. The beauty of it is that they never knew about the original will either. You've never discussed your financial situation with them, so they have no idea what they stand to lose. I spent hours studying my financial records, memorizing every asset and investment. If I was going to play the role of a confused elderly woman, I needed to know exactly what I was pretending to forget. The irony was delicious. I'd never been more financially aware in my entire life. My final preparation involved creating a paper trail that would support my performance. I opened several new bank accounts in different institutions, then began making small, seemingly random transfers between them. To an outside observer, it would look like the confused financial behavior of someone losing their mental faculties. In reality, it was a carefully orchestrated dance designed to create the appearance of vulnerability while actually strengthening my control over my assets. I also began accidentally leaving important documents scattered around my condo: medical bills, bank statements, insurance papers. Nothing that would actually compromise my security, but enough to paint a picture of someone who was losing the ability to manage their affairs properly. The most challenging part was practicing my new relationship with Jennifer. For 3 years, I'd been the eager supplicant, grateful for any attention, quick to offer money or help. Now I needed to become someone who required care while still maintaining the financial resources they'd grown dependent on. I drafted what I privately called the gratitude curriculum, a semester-long course in appreciating what you have before you lose it. Phase 1 would be the health scare, designed to make them realize how much they actually needed me in their lives. Phase 2 would be the financial confusion, making them worry about their own security. Phase 3 would be the revelation, where they'd discover exactly who they'd been disrespecting. The night before I planned to implement my strategy, I sat in Harold's study, surrounded by the financial documents that proved my true worth. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, grateful for crumbs, apologetic for existing, desperate for any sign that I mattered to my own family. That woman was gone. In her place sat someone who understood that respect isn't given freely. It's earned, demanded, and sometimes taught through very expensive lessons. I opened my laptop and logged into Facebook one last time before beginning my performance. Jennifer had posted another complaint. Ugh, Mom called twice today. Doesn't she understand I'm busy? Some people never learn boundaries. I took a screenshot and saved it to a folder labeled Evidence. Someday, when this was all over, I wanted proof of how she treated me when she thought I was powerless. It would make our final conversation so much more satisfying. Tomorrow, my daughter was about to discover that her burden of a mother had been supporting her financially, protecting her from foreclosure, and maintaining her lifestyle, all while being mocked and dismissed as an inconvenience. The education was about to begin, and tuition was going to be very, very expensive. Phase 1 began on a Thursday morning in August. I called Jennifer at 6:30 a.m. deliberately timing it to catch her before her morning routine when she'd be most irritable. Mom, what's wrong? Why are you calling so early? Her voice was thick with sleep and annoyance. Jennifer! Oh, honey, I'm so confused. I was trying to call. Who was I trying to call? I let my voice waver with just the right amount of uncertainty. Mom, you called me. Are you okay? Did I? I don't remember. I've been having such trouble remembering things lately, and I can't find my medication. I know I put it somewhere safe, but I trailed off, practicing the confused helplessness Margaret and I had rehearsed. The change in Jennifer's tone was immediate. The irritation transformed into something I hadn't heard in years. Genuine concern. Mom, stay on the phone with me. I'm getting dressed and coming over right now. Oh, would you? I don't want to be a bother. I know you have your own life. I made my voice small and grateful, the way it used to sound when I genuinely felt like a burden. Don't be silly, Mom. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She arrived in 15, looking genuinely worried. I'd spent the morning carefully staging my condo, pill bottles scattered on the kitchen counter, all vitamins, nothing dangerous. Yesterday's newspaper still folded on the table as if I'd forgotten to read it, and my reading glasses in the refrigerator where I'd absent-mindedly placed them. Mom, your glasses are in the fridge, Jennifer said, her voice carrying a note I couldn't quite identify. Are they? How did they get there? I looked genuinely puzzled, channeling every confused elderly character I'd ever seen in movies. I've been looking everywhere for them. Jennifer spent the next 2 hours helping me organize my medication, checking my cupboards for spoiled food, and asking gentle questions about my daily routine. For the first time since Harold's death, I had my daughter's complete, undivided attention. Mom, have you been eating regularly? Some of this food is way past its expiration date. Is it? I have trouble reading the small print sometimes. This was completely untrue. My vision was perfect. But Jennifer immediately made a mental note to check on my groceries more often. As she was preparing to leave, I played my ace card. Jennifer, I've been thinking, maybe it's time I looked into one of those assisted living places. I don't want to become a burden to you and Brad. The word burden hit her like a physical blow. I watched her face carefully and saw something that looked remarkably like guilt flash across her features. Mom, don't say that. You're not a burden. We want to make sure you're safe and taken care of. But I saw what you wrote on Facebook, I said quietly, about me being a burden, about wishing I understood that you have your own life. Jennifer's face went completely white. Mom, I didn't mean it like that. It's okay, sweetheart. I know I ask too much of you sometimes. Maybe it would be better if I was somewhere where I wouldn't bother anyone. Mom, stop! Please. Jennifer sat back down, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. I was just frustrated that day. I didn't mean for you to see that. The internet is forever, Jennifer. I may be getting confused about some things, but I still know how to use Facebook. She left that day promising to call me every evening and check on me twice a week. Mission accomplished. I had gone from ignored nuisance to priority concern in a single morning. Over the next few weeks, I carefully escalated my performance. I began calling Jennifer with increasingly concerning questions. Honey, what year is it? And I can't remember how to use the microwave. And there's a man at the door, but I can't remember if I know him. It was the mailman I'd chatted with daily for 5 years. Each call brought Jennifer running, her concern growing as she watched her formerly independent mother apparently deteriorating before her eyes. Brad started accompanying her on visits, and I noticed them having whispered conversations in my kitchen about options and what we're going to do. Dr. Chen played her part perfectly. During a staged appointment that Jennifer insisted on attending, she delivered her carefully prepared diagnosis with convincing concern. Mrs. Thompson is showing early signs of cognitive decline. Nothing dramatic yet, but she shouldn't be living alone without some form of regular supervision. The good news is that with proper care and family support, we can likely slow the progression significantly. What kind of care? Jennifer asked, and I could hear the dollar signs calculating in her head. Daily check-ins, help with medication management, assistance with financial decisions, the kind of care that family members often provide when they're nearby and available. Jennifer and Brad exchanged glances. They were both working full-time jobs they couldn't afford to leave, and professional in-home care was expensive. I watched them mentally rearranging their lives to accommodate my supposed neediness. Phase 2 began in September. I started making mistakes with my finances that would directly impact their lifestyle. The first was, accidentally, canceling the automatic transfer I'd been making to help with their mortgage, the mortgage I now secretly owned. "Mom, the bank called," Jennifer said during one of her increasingly frequent visits. You canceled some automatic payment. Did you mean to do that? Did I? I don't remember. There are so many numbers and forms. Maybe you could help me understand it." Jennifer and Brad spent that evening going through my bills with me, supposedly helping me organize my finances. What they were actually doing was conducting reconnaissance, trying to understand my financial situation so they could ensure their own security. They discovered what I wanted them to discover: an apparently confused elderly woman with multiple bank accounts, scattered investments, and increasingly erratic money management. They also discovered something that genuinely shocked them. I had far more money than they'd ever imagined. "Mom," Brad said carefully, "you have accounts at 4 different banks. Do you remember opening all of these?" "Do I? Sometimes I forget. I worry about putting all my money in one place. Harold always said to diversify." They spent the next 3 hours helping me consolidate my finances, which really meant gaining access to account information they could monitor. I let them believe they were helping while actually giving them just enough information to keep them worried and engaged. The second mistake was more dramatic. I accidentally changed my will to leave everything to the Arizona Humane Society, then left the paperwork where Jennifer would find it during one of her organizing sessions. "Mom," she said, holding the document with trembling hands, "what is this?" I looked at the paper with apparent confusion. "I don't know, dear. What does it say?" "It says you're leaving your entire estate to the animal shelter." "Mom, did you mean to do this?" "Did I? I love animals, but I don't remember signing anything. These forms are so confusing." I watched Jennifer's face cycle through horror, grief, and barely concealed panic. She just realized that her financial safety net, the inheritance she'd never acknowledged but had always counted on, was about to go to homeless dogs and cats. "Mom, let's talk about this. Maybe we should have a lawyer look at these documents. Make sure everything is the way you actually want it. Would you help me with that? I get so confused by legal things." Jennifer immediately made an appointment with an estate planning attorney, someone she could trust to help me make more appropriate decisions about my legacy. What she didn't know was that Robert Martinez was monitoring everything, ensuring that no permanent changes could be made to my actual estate plan. Phase 3 began in October when Jennifer and Brad's financial situation reached a crisis point. The house payments they couldn't afford became a foreclosure notice. Their credit cards were maxed out, and Brad's car was repossessed. Their lifestyle of expensive dinners and spontaneous vacations, funded by my donations, was crashing down around them. They tried to hide their desperation, but I could see it in every visit. Jennifer's designer clothes were suddenly from Target. Brad stopped talking about his weekend golf games. They were eating dinner at my place more frequently, not because they enjoyed my company, but because it was free food. The breaking point came on a cold November morning when Jennifer arrived at my door in tears. "Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need your help." "Of course, sweetheart. What's wrong?" "We're going to lose the house. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage, and the bank is starting foreclosure proceedings. Brad's commission has been terrible, and with all the expenses..." "Mom, I don't know what we're going to do. I let her cry against my shoulder, feeling a complex mix of satisfaction and genuine sadness. Satisfaction because my plan was working perfectly. Sadness because my daughter was genuinely suffering. Suffering that could have been avoided if she'd learned to live within her means and treat people with basic respect. How much do you need, honey? I asked gently. I don't know. Maybe $15,000? I know it's a lot. And with your condition, I don't want to burden you with our problems. There was that word again. Burden. But this time, she was applying it to herself. Let me see what I can do, I promised. But Jennifer, I need to tell you something. My memory might be getting fuzzy, but I'm not completely helpless. I've been watching you struggle, and I've been wondering, why didn't you come to me sooner? I didn't want to worry you. And honestly, Mom, I was embarrassed. We should be taking care of you at your age, not the other way around. You have been taking care of me, I said quietly. More than you know. That weekend, Jennifer and Brad received a letter from Desert Holdings LLC informing them that their house had been purchased from the bank, but they could remain as tenants with reasonable rent and an option to buy back the property once they'd stabilized their finances. Jennifer called me, sobbing with relief. Mom, you're not going to believe this. Someone bought our house and wants to let us rent it. It's like a miracle. That's wonderful, honey. Maybe things are looking up, but I wasn't finished with their education yet. December brought the final phase of my plan, the one that would teach them the most important lesson of all. Gratitude isn't something you can take for granted, and respect isn't something you can withdraw without consequences. I began forgetting to pay bills, losing important documents, and making increasingly concerning statements about feeling confused and overwhelmed. Jennifer's visits became daily check-ins, her concern genuine and growing. She also began posting different kinds of updates on Facebook. Gone were the complaints about her burdensome mother. Instead, she wrote things like, spending time with Mom today, grateful for every moment, and learning so much from my mom's strength as she faces health challenges. The public narrative had completely changed. Her friends were now commenting with support and admiration for her dedication to caring for her aging mother. She was getting social approval for being a good daughter instead of sympathy for having difficult family. But the most significant change was in how she treated me during our time together. She listened when I talked. She asked about my day, my feelings, my memories of her father. She brought me flowers, cooked meals with me, and seemed to genuinely enjoy our conversations. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I had my daughter back. On Christmas Eve, as we were decorating my little tree together, Jennifer said something that made my heart both sing and break. Mom, I owe you an apology. Before you got sick, I was so focused on my own problems that I forgot how much you mean to me. I forgot that you're not just my mother. You're a person with your own needs and feelings. I'm sorry I made you feel like a burden. You're not a burden, Mom. You're a blessing. I almost broke character right then and there. The daughter I'd raised, the one I thought I'd lost forever to selfishness and ingratitude, was finally visible again. I love you, Jennifer, I said, and for the first time in months, I meant it without reservation. I love you too, Mom, and I want you to know that Brad and we're going to take better care of you. We're going to make sure you never feel alone or forgotten again. That night, as I lay in bed reviewing my performance of the past 4 months, I realized something important. The revenge had become something else entirely. It had become healing, not just for me, but for our entire relationship. My plan had worked better than I'd ever imagined. But now came the hardest part, deciding how to end it. The confrontation I had been planning for months finally arrived on New Year's Eve, but not in the way I had orchestrated. Sometimes life writes better drama than any playwright could imagine. Jennifer and Brad arrived at my condo that evening for what was supposed to be a quiet celebration. I had prepared myself for another night of carefully managed confusion, but as soon as they walked in, I could see something was different. Jennifer's face was streaked with tears, and Brad looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Mom, we need to talk, Jennifer said, her voice shaking. Something happened today that changes everything. They sat down across from me in my living room, the same room where I'd been performing my elaborate charade for 4 months. But now, looking at their faces, I felt a cold dread settling in my chest. "We went to the rental office today to sign the new lease," Brad began, his voice carefully controlled. "The property manager let something slip. Mom, Dorothy, Desert Holdings LLC isn't some random investment company." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "The property manager mentioned that the owner specifically requested updates about the tenants' well-being. She said it was unusual for an LLC owner to care so much about keeping particular tenants happy. So we did some digging. Jennifer pulled out a folder of papers, corporate filings, property records, bank documents that I recognized with growing horror. Desert Holdings LLC was created in August, she continued, her voice growing stronger and angrier. "The same week you started having memory problems. The registered agent is Robert Martinez, your financial advisor. Mom, you bought our house. You've been our landlord this entire time." The performance was over. 4 months of careful planning, demolished by bureaucratic incompetence and my daughter's newfound investigative skills. I sat in silence, watching their faces as they processed the full scope of what I'd done. "That's not all," Brad said, and his voice was ice cold. "We also found out about the automatic mortgage payments you were making to our bank. For 2 years, Mom, 2 years you were secretly paying our mortgage while we thought we were independent adults. And the medical condition." Jennifer's voice was rising now. "We called Dr. Chen's office to schedule a follow-up appointment. The receptionist was confused because there's no record of any cognitive decline diagnosis. She said Dr. Chen wanted to speak with us directly about some misunderstanding regarding your care." I looked at my daughter and son-in-law, seeing them clearly for the first time in months, not as the ungrateful children I'd been educating, not as the performance audience I'd been manipulating, but as 2 adults who had just discovered they'd been living a lie orchestrated by someone they trusted completely. "Jennifer," I began, but she cut me off. "No, Mom, I'm talking now." She stood up and began pacing, her anger building with each word. "Do you have any idea what you've put us through? The guilt? The fear? I've been arranging my entire life around taking care of you. I left work early every day. I canceled plans. I lay awake at night worrying about what would happen to you if something happened to me. And the money," Brad added, his voice bitter. "All those times we came to you for help, feeling like failures, feeling like we were burdening you, and you were sitting on millions of dollars, playing games with our lives." "It wasn't a game," I said quietly, finally finding my voice. "It was an education." "An education?" Jennifer whirled around to face me. "In what? Humiliation? Manipulation? Mom, what you did to us is cruel beyond belief. What I did to you." The words exploded out of me with months of suppressed rage. "What about what you did to me? What about the Facebook posts calling me a burden? What about excluding me from your wedding? What about treating me like an ATM for 3 years, while publicly complaining about how inconvenient I was to your life?" I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the screenshots I'd been saving. The evidence of their casual cruelty that had started this entire charade. "My mom is such a burden. Wish she'd understand I have my own life to live," I read aloud. "She calls me like 10 times a day. Can't even plan a simple vacation without her making it about her. Shall I continue, Jennifer? Because I have months of this material." Jennifer's face went white as she saw her own words reflected back at her. "You want to talk about cruel?" I continued, my voice gaining strength. "How about discovering that your own daughter discusses manipulating your loneliness with her friends? How about learning that your financial generosity is seen as pathetic desperation rather than love? Mom, those posts showed me exactly how you really felt about me. Like I was some sad, pathetic old woman who had to buy your attention because I had nothing else to offer. Well, congratulations, Jennifer. You were right. I was buying your attention. The difference is, I could afford to." The room fell silent except for the sound of Jennifer crying. But these weren't the tears of a confused, frightened daughter anymore. These were the tears of someone who had been caught, someone who was finally facing the consequences of their choices. "So what now?" Brad asked finally. "What's the end game here, Dorothy? You've proven your point. You've shown us that you're rich and we're not, that you have power and we don't. What do you want from us now?" I looked at them both. These two people who had shaped the last 3 years of my grief and loneliness, and realized that I had no idea what came next. The plan had been about teaching them gratitude, about showing them my value. But sitting here now, looking at the devastation in their faces, I wasn't sure if gratitude could be taught through humiliation. "I want my dignity back," I said finally. "I want to be treated like a human being instead of an inconvenience. I want to be included in your lives because you want me there, not because you need my money. And I want you to understand that respect isn't optional in family relationships." "And if we can't give you that," Jennifer asked quietly, "then at least I'll have my self-respect and my money and a life that doesn't revolve around being grateful for crumbs of attention from people who see me as a burden." Jennifer looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. The anger was still there, but underneath it, I could see something that looked like understanding. "Mom," she said finally, "what you did was wrong. It was manipulative and cruel and brilliant, but it was still wrong." "Yes, it was," I agreed. "But so was what you did to me. So where does that leave us?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "I really don't know." That night, for the first time in months, I slept without having to remember what performance I needed to give the next day. The truth was finally out. Messy and painful and complicated. But it was the truth, and that was something I hadn't had with my family in a very long time. 6 months later, I'm sitting on the porch of my new home in Desert Ridge, watching the Arizona sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. The house is smaller than my old condo, but infinitely more peaceful. It's in a 55-plus community where my neighbors actually enjoy my company and invite me to book club meetings because they want to hear my opinions, not because they need something from me. The conversation that New Year's Eve was just the beginning. Jennifer and Brad spent the next month alternating between rage and something that looked like grudging respect. We had dinner together exactly once during that time, a stilted, awkward affair, where we all tried to pretend that nothing fundamental had changed between us, but everything had changed. I was no longer their emergency ATM or their guilt management project. I was Dorothy Thompson, a woman with choices, boundaries, and the financial independence to enforce both. In February, I made my final decision about their future. Through Robert Martinez, I offered them a clear path forward. They could purchase their house from Desert Holdings LLC at exactly what I'd paid for it, with a reasonable payment plan spread over 5 years. No interest, no penalties, but also no more financial gifts, no more bailouts, and no more treating me like their personal bank account. They took the offer, not because they were grateful. I don't think gratitude can be forced or taught through humiliation, but because they finally understood that their choices had consequences. Jennifer and I speak once a week now, usually on Sunday evenings. Our conversations are different than they were before my educational period. They're more honest, less performative. She doesn't ask for money, and I don't offer unsolicited advice. We talk about her work, my new friends, books we're reading, memories of Harold. Last month, she apologized. Not the defensive, justifying apology she'd offered on New Year's Eve, but a real acknowledgement of how she'd treated me. "Mom, I was selfish and cruel, and I took advantage of your grief and loneliness. I'm ashamed of the person I was during those years." I accepted her apology, but I also told her the truth. "Jennifer, I forgive you, but I won't forget, and I won't put myself in a position to be treated that way again." She nodded, and I think she understood that forgiveness doesn't mean returning to old patterns. Brad and I have found an unexpected peace. He was the most honest about what happened. "Dorothy, what you did was devious as hell, but we deserved it. We were using you, and we knew it. The fact that you could afford to teach us a lesson doesn't make the lesson wrong. My new life is built on different foundations. The retirement community has given me friends who value my conversation, my cooking, and my company without any ulterior motives. I've joined the planning committee for community events, started volunteering at the local animal shelter, which will still inherit my money someday, though Jennifer doesn't know that, and begun taking art classes. Most importantly, I've learned to value my own company. The woman who used to feel desperate for any attention from her family now chooses solitude when it serves her and companionship when it enriches her life. Harold's financial planning has given me more than security. It's given me freedom. Freedom to say no, freedom to set boundaries, freedom to walk away from relationships that diminish rather than enhance my life. I think about that Facebook post sometimes. My mom is such a burden. And I smile. Jennifer was right in a way. I was a burden when I made my worth dependent on their approval, when I bought their attention instead of demanding their respect. But I'm not anyone's burden now. I'm Dorothy Thompson, 70-year-old woman of independent means and independent spirit. I'm someone who learned that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity. Even if the lesson costs a few $100,000 and takes the better part of a year to complete, the education was expensive, but it was worth every penny. Sometimes the most valuable lessons are the ones you teach yourself. And the most important respect is the respect you insist on from the people who claim to love you. Today marks 1 year since I discovered that Facebook post. Jennifer called this morning to tell me she's expecting her first child. My first grandchild. She asked if I'd like to be involved, and I heard something in her voice I hadn't heard in years, hope mixed with genuine uncertainty about my answer. I'd love to be a grandmother, I told her, but this time we do it on equal terms. I wouldn't have it any other way, Mom, she replied, and I believe she means it. As the sun sets over the Sonoran Desert, I'm planning my next chapter. There's a river cruise through Europe I've been considering, and several of my neighbors are interested in joining me. We're all women who've discovered that the best years of our lives might still be ahead of us. The burden has been lifted, and it turns out it was never mine to carry in the first place.